The story of a people is never written only in books, carved only in monuments, or remembered only in stories passed down across generations. Sometimes the most powerful record of who we are lives in a place no empire could destroy, no ship could carry away, and no force could rewrite. That record lives inside the body itself, hidden within the quiet codes of DNA. And when you look closely at that code, when science pulls back the layers and reveals the truth behind ancestry, you begin to see a connection so deep, so undeniable, and so beautifully complex that it forces you to look at identity with new eyes. This truth is what binds the Igbo, the Yoruba, and the countless descendants of Africa scattered across oceans and continents. It is a hidden thread that stretches from ancient kingdoms to modern cities, from villages along the Niger River to apartment streets in London, New York, Kingston, Rio, and beyond. It is a connection that has survived capture, forced migration, separation, and generations of silence. And yet it still speaks. It speaks in the way people walk, in the tone of their voice, in the rhythm of their music, in the names they carry, in the foods they gravitate toward, in the intuition they trust, and in the resilience they naturally possess. It speaks loudest in the one place no historical interruption could fully erase, the architecture of their DNA. When we talk about the Igbo and Yoruba, we are not talking about tribes as the world often mistakenly frames them. We are talking about civilizations, societies with complex economies, spiritual systems, art, language, mathematics, governance, philosophy, and knowledge systems that stood tall long before the modern world took shape. The Igbo, known for their decentralized leadership and community-driven values, built societies where individual potential was honored and innovation thrived. They held principles of equality, personal responsibility, craftsmanship, and the pursuit of excellence. Across the western stretch, the Yoruba established systems so advanced in structure, kingship, trade, poetry, medicine, and divination that their cultural footprints can still be traced across continents. Their cities, like our life and Oyo, were centers of scholarship, where philosophy and cosmology shaped everyday life. When people today of African descent speak with strength, organize with unity, think with creativity, or walk with confidence, they often assume these are individual traits, but many of them are inherited cultural signatures that traveled through DNA and memory. These ancient civilizations did not vanish, they evolved, they traveled, and they resurfaced in the diaspora in ways the world did not expect. When forced migration scattered millions across the Atlantic, it was not only bodies that were carried away, languages, traditions, memories, and identities crossed too, often unconsciously. A person in Haiti may say a proverb that resembles one spoken in Igbo land for centuries. A family in Cuba may practice rituals strikingly similar to Yoruba customs. A community in Brazil may drum rhythms nearly identical to those used in West Africa long before any map recognized those places. These are not coincidences. They are the fingerprints of a connection that science is only now beginning to understand fully. Genetic studies show clear markers linking African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans, Afro-Brazilians, and Afro-Latin communities to the Igbo, the Yoruba, and other West African populations. These markers reveal shared ancestry, shared migrations, shared struggles, and shared strengths. But beyond the biological science, something deeper remains: the instinct to survive, create, rebuild, and rise again. Look closely and you will see the Igbo trait of resilience etched into descendants across the world. You will see the Yoruba genius for rhythm and spirituality shining in music from gospel to samba to reggae. You will see the entrepreneurial fire of West African marketplaces glowing inside the ambition of Black-owned businesses worldwide. You will see the communal values of traditional societies mirrored in the way diaspora neighborhoods unite during hardship. You will see the creativity of ancient artisans resurfacing in modern fashion, art, dance, and storytelling. Even when centuries attempted to separate a people from their origin, certain traits refused to fade. Strength refused to bend. Genius refused to disappear. The hidden thread refused to break. Everywhere the diaspora exists, you find echoes of this unbroken inheritance. In the tilt of a child's head, The boldness in a woman's laughter, the depth in a man's determination, the power in a community's unity. These things reveal a lineage older than oppression, stronger than injustice, and more persistent than time. These qualities are not merely cultural, they are embedded. They are the remnants of ancestors who built kingdoms, charted trade routes, crafted art that spoke to the soul, and carved identity into the very soil beneath their feet. When the world tries to define Black identity only through what was taken, they miss the bigger truth. Identity is more deeply defined by what was never lost, what survived the journey, what endured the storm, what lived even through silence. The science of DNA has become a modern compass, pointing people back toward the places from which their story began. When diaspora individuals receive genetic results, connecting them to Igbo or Yoruba heritage, many describe it as a feeling of recognition, a sense of remembering something they never consciously learned. That feeling is not imagined. It is the echo of connection. It is the mind responding to ancient information the body always knew, and that recognition, that spark of belonging, that realization that you are not a scattered puzzle but part of a living continuum, that is the beginning of healing for many. It is the moment where identity stops being a question and becomes an understanding. You are not disconnected. You are not floating without a past. You are a continuation of something powerful, intentional, structured, and meaningful. And this understanding matters because identity shapes destiny. When a person knows who they are, they carry themselves differently. They speak with a confidence that cannot be manufactured. They approach challenges with the quiet certainty of someone whose ancestors were problem solvers long before modern civilization formed. They believe in their ability to rise because rising is what their lineage has always done. Knowing your origins is not simply about celebrating the past. It is about unlocking the present. The moment the diaspora understands that their story begins with brilliance, not brokenness, the world will witness a transformation. Because when people stop seeing themselves as descendants of struggle alone and begin seeing themselves as descendants of empires, genius, innovation, and strength, their choices shift, their mindset expands, and their future opens. The hidden thread between the Igbo, Yoruba, and diaspora is more than blood. It is a roadmap. It shows the world how interconnected humanity truly is. It shows how cultures survive even under pressure. It shows how identity is shaped not only by history but by biology, memory, and resilience. And above all, it shows that no matter how far people travel, the core of who they are follows. This connection teaches us that heritage is not something you can lose by crossing oceans or generations. It is encoded, preserved, carried silently in the body like a priceless message waiting to be remembered. So as you listen to this message and reflect on your own life, understand this. You are the living proof that your ancestors did not just endure history, they shaped. Their brilliance flows through you. Their strength supports you. Their memory lifts you. And the hidden thread that ties the Igbo, Yoruba, and diaspora together is alive in every breath you take, every talent you express, every dream you pursue. You are not simply the product of survival. You are the continuation of greatness. And nothing, not time, not distance, not circumstance, can break the connection written in your DNA. Your DNA carries the memory of civilizations. Igbo, Yoruba, and the diaspora are still one people, because identity is not erased by distance, time, or oppression. It is carried in the very blueprint of who you are, in the unseen code that travels silently from generation to generation. Even when names were changed, lands were left behind, and languages were interrupted, the deeper truth remained untouched. There is a genetic familiarity that stretches across continents, a quiet recognition in the way people speak, move, think, and connect. This is why someone born in the Caribbean can step into Lagos or Enugu and feel a strange closeness to people they have never met. This is why an African American can stand in a West African village and feel an emotion too old to explain. The spirit recognizes what the mind was never taught. That invisible thread of ancestry pulls people toward the roots that shaped them, reminding them that they did not begin in captivity. They began in civilization. Civilizations live in your DNA because they shaped the strength your ancestors needed to survive. The Igbo tradition of resilience, self-reliance, and community governance created a people who instinctively value independence and creativity. The Yoruba tradition of philosophy, art, spirituality, and structured society created a people who carry harmony, rhythm, and intellectual depth in the way they communicate. These traits didn't disappear across the ocean. They were carried into the New World and reborn through music, resistance, innovation, and culture. Long before science confirmed the connection, the spirit always knew that these lineages were not broken. They were transport. Even under the harshest conditions, African descendants held on to fragments of rhythm, tone, praise, storytelling, and communal living. These were not random behaviors, they were genetic memories resurfaced. The diaspora survived by instinct, and that instinct often mirrored the ancestral patterns of the Igbo and Yoruba people. The call and response structure found in African American churches mirrors the communal speaking forms of West Africa. The drum patterns in reggae, blues, and hip-hop echo the heartbeat of Yoruba bata drums and Igbo rhythms. Even certain words, cadences, and tonal expressions found in Black speech across the world resemble the linguistic structure of African tonal language. This is not coincidence, this is coded memory. Your DNA carries history the world tried to bury. Without a textbook, without a map, without a recorded lineage, Black people around the world still recreate cultural systems similar to those in Africa. This is living proof that the connection never died. Being one people does not mean being identical. It means sharing an origin so deep that it continues to shape identity long after physical separation. The diaspora created new cultures from old foundations, mixing African heritage with the realities of new worlds, but the roots stayed the same. Look at how Black communities everywhere value rhythm, respect elders, honor community, and uplift storytelling. These are ancient African values resurfacing in modern forms. Look at the natural confidence, the emotional intelligence, the expressive communication. These are gifts inherited from ancestors who understood the power of voice and the strength of unity. Across countries and cultures, Black people share a generational intuition that comes from centuries of encoded survival. Your DNA does not only carry the memory of pain, it carries the memory of brilliance. The Igbo built thriving economic networks and democratic systems long before colonial contact, and traces of this entrepreneurial spirit appear wherever their descendants live. The Yoruba built kingdoms that celebrated knowledge, art, diplomacy, and structure, and echoes of this appear in the creative intelligence of their diaspora descendants. The world often talks about slavery as though it was the start of Black history, but DNA proves otherwise. The beginning was genius. The beginning was innovation. The beginning was a people who shaped the world long before they were scattered. Even now, as diaspora and Blacks seek to reconnect with their African origins, DNA testing often reveals surprising accuracy. People who grew up with no knowledge of their family history discover Igbo ancestry, Yoruba roots, or other West African lineages that reflect cultural traits they've always felt intuitively. This shows that identity doesn't disappear, it waits for rediscovery. And when you finally reconnect with your ancestral truth, something inside you settles. You begin to understand why certain things feel natural, why certain cultures feel familiar, and why certain traditions resonate deeply. It is not random, it is remembered. The memory of civilizations lives inside you as a silent guide. It explains your resilience, your creativity, your rhythm, your instinct for community, and your ability to rise through adversity. You carry the strength of people who refuse to break, the intelligence of people who built systems long before the world acknowledged them, and the spirit of people whose influence survived oceans and oppression. When you understand that your DNA holds the echo of Igbo innovation, Yoruba expression, and diaspora perseverance, you begin to walk differently. You stop letting the world define your worth. You stop accepting the lie of disconnect. You begin to see the unity that was always there, written not on paper but in your blood. This is why, no matter where Black people go, they adapt, rebuild, and rise. It is why they excel in music, leadership, creativity, and cultural expression. They are not learning these things for the first time, they are remembering them. Just as a seed carries the memory of the tree, your DNA carries the memory of a continent. And that memory is powerful enough to outlive separation, transformation, and reinvention. The world may have scattered African people across the globe, but the bloodline never stopped speaking. The thread never broke. The story never ended. It simply moved, evolved, and waited for the day people would realize that they have always been one people, bound by an origin deeper than history books and stronger than the forces that tried to erase it. You are not disconnected. You are not rootless. You are not drifting without origin. You are the living continuation of civilizations that still breathe through your instincts, your voice, your rhythm, and your spirit. Your DNA carries the memory of who you were before the world tried to tell you who you are. And the moment you recognize that truth, you reclaim the identity that was never truly lost, only hidden, waiting for you to remember. Identity isn't lost through oppression. It survives in tone, rhythm, instinct, and unbreakable spirit. It hides in the quiet places of a people's soul, in the subtle way a voice rises at the end of a sentence, in the rhythm of footsteps that match patterns older than memory, in the instinctive ways a community greets, mourns, celebrates, or teaches. Even when history tries to silence a people, even when forced migration scatters families across oceans, even when new languages are imposed, the internal rhythm of who they are continues to pulse beneath everything. That pulse is not erased. It adapts, it reshapes, it waits for the moment someone listens closely enough to recognize it. You can hear it in the laughter that sounds like home, even if the person laughing has never seen the land of their ancestors. You can feel it in the natural ease with which certain melodies come to a people who have never studied them formally but somehow know exactly how to move with them. You can see it in expressions, in gestures, in the natural cadence of stories told by grandparents who never learned the old languages yet unknowingly speak in the patterns of those languages every day. Identity travels in blood. It moves through generations as quietly as breath. It survives the breaking apart of nations and the rewriting of histories because it is held not just in the mind but in the body. Tone is genetic. Rhythm is inherent. The instinct to emphasize certain syllables, the way a voice lifts in excitement or drops in seriousness, the unique musicality of speech. These are not accidents. They are memories carried inside the body like coded messages, like whispers handed down through DNA. Even when a people forget the words of their ancestors, they never forget the sound of them. That sound lives on in the new languages they speak, reshaping those languages with a flavor, a melody, a way of breathing life into every sentence that no one else can replicate. Oppression can remove land, but it cannot remove lineage. It can erase records, but it cannot erase resonance. It can forbid a language, but it cannot forbid the rhythm of that language from reappearing in new. That is why you can meet someone in the diaspora who has never heard a single Igbo proverb, yet their storytelling style follows the same patterns their ancestors used. That is why you can listen to Yoruba music for the first time and feel an unexplainable connection, as if your body recognizes something your mind has never encountered. That is why African-descended people across the world share tonal qualities, speech rhythms, emotional depth, and expressive power that feel universal across borders. The world may not understand it, but their DNA understands it. Identity does not disappear simply because someone tried to bury it. When Africans were scattered across continents, the world assumed their identity would fade with time. But identity became the most loyal traveler. It traveled in heartbeat tempos, in the tilt of a head, in the quickness of a smile, in the way children mimic the emotional rhythms of parents whose parents mimicked ancestors they never met. It survived because it was rooted too deeply to uproot. It was etched into the blueprint of existence itself. It was carried in the sound of drums that beat inside the chest even when no physical drums were allowed. It was carried in the courage to keep singing even when singing was banned. It was carried in the wisdom of mothers who braided entire histories into the hair of their daughters. It was carried in the endurance of fathers who kept walking forward even when every system pushed them back. Identity is a river that never stops flowing. It changes shape, but it doesn't stop moving. It faces rocks, storms, barriers, and droughts, yet it always finds a way to continue forward. That is why descendants of the Igbo, the Yoruba, the Akan, and countless other African peoples still carry echoes of their ancestors in the way they talk, sing, dance, laugh, argue, and love. It is not nostalgia. It is inheritance. It is not coincidence, it is continuity. You can remove a people from their homeland, but you cannot remove the homeland from the people. And when the world tries to categorize you as lost, broken, or disconnected, remember that the rhythm inside you is proof that nothing essential was ever taken from you. You are the continuation of everything your ancestors were. Their intelligence flows through you. Their creativity moves through your voice. Their strength exists in your perseverance. Their language, though changed in words, still breathes in your tone. Their culture, though reshaped, still dances in your instincts. Their spirit, unbreakable, unshakable, unstoppable, still stands tall inside you. You are not disconnected. You are evidence. Evidence that no force on earth can sever a bloodline designed to survive. Evidence that identity is not a fragile thing that time can erase. Evidence that culture lives even without permission. You are not simply speaking a language. You are continuing one. You are not simply moving through life. You are carrying centuries of brilliance forward. You are the voice your ancestors never got to raise, the freedom they never got to experience, the living proof that what they endured was not in vain. Their story didn't end with them. It is still unfolding through you. And every time you speak with pride, every time you honor where you come from, every time you choose growth over doubt, every time you look in the mirror and recognize something powerful looking back, you resurrect a history that was never destroyed, only hidden waiting for you to awaken. What connects Black people across continents is deeper than history, because history can be rewritten, forgotten, edited, or reshaped depending on who is telling it, but the genetic code tells the truth with a kind of honesty that cannot be erased. When we talk about the connection between Black people worldwide, we are not speaking only about a shared struggle or a shared past. We are speaking about something that existed long before borders, long before colonization, long before languages were separated, and long before people were divided by oceans. In the bloodstream of millions of people living today, there are echoes of migrations that took place tens of thousands of years ago. There are patterns in the DNA that show how families expanded, how clans moved, how cultures evolved, and how entire civilizations rose and transformed. Even when people were forced across continents, even when their names were changed, their languages suppressed, and their cultural identities broken apart, the genetic truth never disappeared. It remained as a silent archive, carrying the memory of who they were before the world tried to redefine them. This connection is not philosophical. It is biological. Two people living on opposite sides of the world, one in Nigeria and the other in Brazil, can share markers in their DNA that trace back to the same ancestral groups. A person in Jamaica can have a pattern of genes that link directly to Yoruba or Igbo origins, even if they never learned those languages, never heard those stories, or never had the chance to grow up within those cultural traditions. A boy in South Carolina might have genetic ties to the same region as a girl in Sierra Leone. A family in Trinidad might unknowingly carry the same inherited rhythms, tonal patterns, and biological traits found in families from Cameroon. This is why music, speech patterns, spirituality, and even physical movement often feel instinctively familiar across the diaspora. It is not coincidence, it is inheritance. It is the body remembering what the world tried to make it forget. This connection does not fade with distance, because DNA does not lose its memory just because it crosses an ocean. When you listen to the cadence of African American English and compare it to the musicality of Yoruba speech, you notice similarities in tone, rhythm, and emphasis. When you observe the dances of the Caribbean and compare them to movements in West Africa, you see the same grounding of the feet, the same relationship between drum and body, the same instinctive timing. When you listen to spirituals and compare their tonal structure to ancient African chants, you find echoes that cannot be explained by accident. These things exist because the genetic memory of people persists through generations. Even when culture is attacked, biology keeps the blueprint intact. The connection is also emotional. Many Black people who travel to Africa for the first time describe the experience as a spiritual shock, a sense of recognition without explanation. Some say they felt like they had returned even though they had never been there before. Some describe it as a feeling of being seen for the first time, or a sense that something inside them aligned with the land, the people, the air, or the sound of the languages. This happens because identity is not only taught, it is carried. A child can be raised in a completely different environment, learn a different language, practice different customs, and still feel a pull toward the place where their ancestors existed for thousands of years. That pull is not imagination, it is the body responding to familiarity on a level beyond conscious understanding. This connection becomes even clearer when scientists map genetic lineage. They find that people across the African diaspora share deep ancestral clusters that reveal how closely related their communities once were. They see that the same ancient populations that lived near the Niger Delta or along the Congo River contributed to the DNA of millions of people around the world. They see migrations that moved from Central Africa to East Africa, from West Africa to North Africa, from the Sahel down to the coastlines, long before anyone recorded history. They see the fingerprints of kingdoms, trading networks, cultural exchanges, and early civilizations that shaped the world before Europe even formed its first states. And all of this is preserved in the genes of people living today. This is why the connection across continents is not something that can be destroyed. Empires tried, colonizers tried, slave traders tried, systems of oppression tried, assimilation policies tried, cultural erasure tried, but DNA carried the truth through every storm. It carried memories of tone, rhythm, resilience, creativity, community, and strength. It carried the essence of what it means to belong to a lineage that survived the unimaginable. It carried proof that identity is not defined by borders but by origin, and that origin is unbroken. Across the world today, Black people are beginning to rediscover this truth. They are uncovering their ancestry through science, reconnecting with languages once spoken by their ancestors, learning the cultural practices that were taken from them, and finding unity in the knowledge that they share more than history. They share heritage, they share roots, they share a narrative written in their blood long before the world wrote anything on paper. This is why the connection is deeper than history. History can lose its pages, but DNA does not lose its memory. And as more people awaken to this reality, the global Black community grows stronger, more united, more aware of its power, and more determined to reclaim every piece of identity that was ever scattered, silenced, or stolen.